Okay, I want to do a quick video again. Um, just a quick follow up on, excuse me, a video that I recently saw, and I promise this is my last video on this. It's not really a back and forth kind of thing. It's just that, you know, um, turns out a little bit more. I hope Kebata didn't get me. Okay, so the main thing I wanted to say in response to her video in the destruction of the shrines. Now, of course, she said, of course, for some people they don't have these experiences. I'm not gonna lie. There was a period that I think maybe I fell into a bit of stagnation, and I won't say bad things or a series of bad things happened to me. Not at all. Quite the quite the opposite. It's another story that I really don't really want to get into. Um, but let's just say that ultimately it was very protective experience. A lot of the dreams and synchronicities I had in waking life all corresponded to the fact that it was ultimately a protective spirit that was connected with me and overseeing my spiritual progress and walk with it. So I just want to make sure that I kind of just share that, and she did as well. So I think there are reasons why people have different experiences, which kind of leads me to my points here. So first off, I just want to say with African spirituality, for all of them, the ones that are pretty straightforward and we have strong connections and understandings and learnings to the ones that are more obscure because we do not have access to the knowledge and resources and the ability to go travel and learn and reconnect, so they remain obscure. Either way, all of those traditions and practices that are held at different varying levels are all where they should be. That makes sense. Um, what a lot of people don't understand, and why a lot of people that are African American are in the diaspora move so boldly and confidently and with such security and strength and authority in the reconnection and working with um, the traditional spiritual systems and spirits that exist in nature is because of the fact that we are reclaiming the birthright and the right that we naturally were gifted with, that were taken away by the process of colonization. Specifically, if you look at the doctrine of discovery and the papist bulls that are held by the Catholic Church, you will see that those are mandates, religious mandates that were intertwined thoroughly with actions and movements of governments, right? Because the two are connected and intertwined. One gives strength and authority to the other. So the papist bull, the doctrine of discovery, were mandates that allowed explorers during that time, as they went into whatever countries that they explored, that those people in their spiritual practices should be seen as demonic. They should be immediately converted, and those that do not convert should be subject to death or some other form of extreme torture or being removed in some way. But nonetheless, it's about the extreme religious conversion, right, of Native people. So for African Americans, what does this look like? This looks like um, many African Americans today are mandated or are tied into the practice and understanding and knowledge of Christianity by threat of the sword that was imposed on their ancestors. And so it's just a generational in training of each subsequent generation that it is about Christianity and the patriarch and the Abrahamic traditions. It is about the propagation of propagation, the upholding and the establishing of those religious traditions as what is deemed good and appropriate. And so what happens to the traditional systems that were abandoned by force? It's for future generations to decide, once they have that knowledge and education and resources on that exact situation, that they can make the decision on what would be best for them. Understanding that it was by force that you were brought into the understanding of Christianity. You have it inherently through blood, through ancestral, connection to it, and sincere belief and faith that did get us through. Obviously we are here today. But as the generation now, where you have that knowledge, you have the right to go back and see and learn and reclaim, if you choose, those things that were forcefully taken and detached from you by virtue of history and what has happened in the past. So it's all about a decision. And so I'll just leave it there. I think a lot of times it can be lost, like in all of the abstract discussion and abstract discussion of the Bible and all that, which is a great thing, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's just easier to find the shortcut. I don't have time to get lost in the long theoretical conversations. I need to know the truth. I need to know what connects me to who I am, So I want to make sure that I say that. And I guess that brings me to my second point. You choose to continue in a biblical focus, which you have the right to do. That is literally what, in America, I don't know. Like, I think it would be good to maybe even know and learn and understand the spiritual traditional systems that exist in the diaspora before we go off and exploring in Africa to understand what those roots are. What was your grandma, great grandma doing? There's a fusion naturally that exists between the Christian practices given to us and the traditional native practices that our ancestors still remembered and held on to, that work together quite well, to be honest, and fuse together. Of course, different practices throughout the diaspora that all do the synchronization. So I don't want there to be this, for some people that, also is another discussion, the insistence to immediately discount these practices and traditions because they involve synchronicity is intellectually lazy at best. Have some nuance, be willing to understand how spirit moves and spirit works. Understand that if it's really about an ancestral connection, respect it. Respect all of the spiritual wisdom and power and knowledge that exists within Christian practices and traditional spiritual practices, because if it's really about your healing and your growth and your evolution, they're going to work together anyway. So I just want to make sure that if you choose to continue to have a biblical focus or a Judeo-Christian focus, that's fine. But, understand the difference between the two. Understand what Spiritism is, as Spanish would say, espiritismo. that in and of itself is what it is. And either you understand that and you connect with that and you flow with that, or you don't. Skipping ahead, that kind of brings us to my other point. Everything isn't for everybody. You know, we don't know. My astrological placement, I'm proud to say, I'll go ahead and say I'm a Pisces, right? So that means that I am naturally a spiritually in tune, connected person. Be, only because as a Pisces, if I am not constantly grounded and connected to spirituality, I am lost in the sauce. I'm down bad, right? So, of course, going on to learning and connecting to spiritual things that are truly ascendant and esoteric and astral, you know, may not connect for everyone, may not be for everyone, but it is for me. And for a lot of people that are connected in that way. Everybody is wired different. So I want to just point that out. Let's see. Okay, yeah, and so I already said that before. Unlike our ancestors, our spiritual quest, spiritual um, journeys and experiences are not by force, you know, whereas theirs were. So make sure you are not still moving under the paradigm that is by force. It's not. It's not. If you do the research and really step back to understand history and accept history for what history is. I've done a lot of history explorations, research, history explorations. I've done a lot of research, you know, particularly in college, the history of the church, history of the Catholic Church, history of the Inquisitions. So yeah, if you look at things from a objective perspective, it can help remove some of the emotion to make a more holistic decision and help you in a more holistic approach to things. I think at least it's been the case for me. Let's see. I think it's also important to, I don't know her entire story, right? I can only speak for my story and from what she's kind of, you know, loosely shared, and and you know, if you want to know and learn about how spirituality in spiritism works, you have to have the humility to ask that specific question, right? Because it doesn't come with money, fame, or notoriety. That's for you, right? So you have to have the humility to want to know and to learn. And furthermore, if you want to understand specifically how blood sacrifice works, even though we're moving into an age where that practice is not as that practice is de-emphasized, rightly so. But nonetheless, it exists and it's a reality, and it has been, and it probably will continue to be. But the fact is, if you want to understand how that works rather than demonizing it, it would be wise to seek the understanding of it and have the humility to learn. Nobody can teach you that better than a Nigerian. Than Nigerian, honestly, I know this is a Ghanaian, a Ghanaian spiritual tradition we're talking about here, and I'm sure that they are great at explaining the exact same thing. But for me, for us, for African Americans, perhaps nobody can better explain it and break it down to you than a spiritual practitioner, elder, priestess, Babalawo, in the Ifa tradition of Nigeria, out of Yoruba land. Even better, who can really explain to you how blood sacrifice works to a T, would be the Igbo people of Nigeria. Now, you really want to have a clear understanding of things. ask them, and then take it back to what you know, and then I would think you would have a lot of clarity. At least I did. So I just want to make sure I say that. Another thing too to keep in mind, if you were willing to do that research and get that understanding, it'll bring you back to this point that I'm bringing up now. It's all about um, the being a high vibe being, right? If you are fundamentally a high vibe being, you're gonna have results that continue to support that. Because in spirituality, in spiritism, this world is a marketplace, right? And so what you get depends, what you want depends on what you're willing to pay. Um, but if you're a high vibe being, these things don't really matter much. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I hope you kind of get that. So another thing that I hear a lot, in her current position in some of the videos that she's done is, and how she's kind of interfaced with that, which is the reference to the I am, right? The I am, her I am. That can easily be explained also through African spiritual tradition. Again, going back to the Ifa tradition, um, from the Yoruba land in the Yoruba people. Okay, so the idea of your Ori, right, is which is fundamentally your higher self that exists in heaven, right? Your Ori is the same thing as your I am. And your Ori guides you in your spiritual practice and what you do spiritually. And it is your Ori that is strengthened, enhanced, and empowered from your rituals that you do and your connection to said shrines or certain shrines. Um, so I would advise anyone to go through Ifa first for your understanding. Everyone that I went through, except for two young ladies, two women weren't. All the rest of it, well, actually it was three. It was two women and one guy. They were not Ifa practitioners or initiates. The rest of us were. And I'll tell you definitely that for the ones of us that did have those spiritual connections in place, had a stronger experience, a more connected experience. Definitely, especially the guy that I was with. I think he was a child of Shango, but anyway, very very important to realize that your level of understanding and spiritual connection going into it makes a difference in what you get out of it. Um, and furthermore, kind of the other point, the spiritual lifestyle and spiritism isn't for everybody. Period. It matters. What your purpose is. What your astrological chart says. Get, real readings. If you get a reading, it'll tell you as well. So it definitely depends on those kinds of things. Also, I will say for this, from what I can see, right? Um, if you don't have any previous spiritual relationship or experience by yourself, in your own right, by yourself, you're going to have a hard time from what I can tell. Um, and I guess that would also go for a lot of spiritual communities, but particularly in African traditional systems, especially when we're talking about being there at the root with it. I will say it's not really even an option, and I know in some countries, but in Ghana, you can kind of do your own thing. It depends on who you are working with or connected to. But back here in America, wherever you're from, right? Um, you really have to have a spiritual frame and relationship and connection and understanding all by yourself on your own. Otherwise, you'll always kind of be a puppet to what others kind of, you'll never have a strong, intuitive knowing of things on your own. There has to be a willingness of yourself to connect, know, and learn. But again, that all depends on the person. Fundamentally, in African spiritual traditions, we all know that there is one supreme God, right? Nobody is not. I haven't come across a tradition yet that says anything otherwise. There is one, supreme, God and everything. It's about the study of God's movement in nature, right? And so, yeah, I hope I'm explaining that well enough. I don't want to belabor that too much. So I'll also say this too. This is kind of my last point that I wanted to kind of bring up. It, in terms of everyone is different. I'm from the South, right? I've been in the South, lived in the South my whole life. I believe she's from the West Coast, right? So we have different ancestral connections, um, different ancestral stories. People that born, raised, lived in the South would have an easier time connecting to groups and communities, and practitioners that are tapped in and tuned on to traditional systems and practices, right? But also in the South, we're just more in nature. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's the country. You know, we are a lot more in nature than they are in California, and so I just think that makes a difference. Um, knowing who your granddaddy, great granddaddy, great great granddaddy was, all in the same cemetery, makes a difference. So all of those kind of things make a difference in the results that somebody will have. So I just wanted to just offer that, not trying to be contrary or destructive or argumentative or contrary or anything like that. I just want to make sure that I offer my point of view, to give a well-rounded point of view, and to just offer that as someone who is also connected to, or well, she has disconnected, but I just wanted to make sure that I said something to kind of, I want to say advocate for, but to really give a well-rounded view of this whole thing, from a spiritual practitioner's perspective, um, uh, and just kind of offer that. So thank you so much for your time and attention, and you have a good day.